Welcome to LaunchPad, a tech blast podcast which reveals what is needed to scale a successful technology startup. In each episode, industry players such as entrepreneurs and investors will discuss one aspect of growing a technology company and offer practical advice for scaling your business. In this episode, we are joined by Tech Returners CEO Beckie Taylor. Tech Returners helps mid-senior level tech professionals to re-enter the workplace following a career break. Today, Beckie will help us to define flexible workforce, discuss the opportunities and challenges around building one, consider the wider tech employment landscape, and explain how Tech Returners is working with North Coders following its acquisition. So, Beckie, nice to see you today. Thank you for being our first guest on LaunchPad.
Oh, how exciting. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. First of all, we kind of need to define flexible working. You know, people talk around it a lot, but what actually is it?
What a great question to start with. And I sort of define it as that it means different things to different people. So if I look in terms of my background, so previous to setting Tech Returners up, I was a HR director for a leading SaaS-based technology business. And I was the person that wrote the policies in the handbooks around flexible working, how to put a flexible working request in. And I think it was only through my journey in my career and then having children that I actually realized, well, actually means different things to different people. So for myself, flexible working means the ability to take my children to school every morning and pick them up and then maybe catch up in the evening. Where some members of my team like it in terms of have the flexibility of having a couple of hours out in the middle of the day to run life sort of challenges, life problems, like go to the gym and being able to do things that, you know, meet their needs as well. So I think it's such a huge concept. It really does mean different things to different people. What does it mean to you, Jonathan?
I think it's the flexibility, like you say. I mean, life, if you get to the end of the working week, then how you define that has been a success. Obviously, you've got a checklist of work that you want to get through, services that you want to provide to customers, for example. But actually, it's about life as well. So, for example, straight after this recording, I'm going to the local junior school to pretend to be a rapper, a dad pretending to be a rapper. In front of a load of year 6 kids, well, an entire school. So if I slip in like what's ups and all that kind of stuff during our interview, I apologize. My head's full of my lines. But that's the definition of it for me, is that we can record this podcast. I can go and do that, you know, something for the community, if you like, come back and do some more work and not be expected to kind of be in a certain set place between 4 walls, between set hours.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I've been telling some people today, actually, that after today, my life becomes very much of a juggle for the next 6 weeks. So I'll have both children. Emmy's sort of finishing preschool tomorrow and a transition to primary school. Ethan finishes year 5. So I have both children around for 6 weeks. And, you know, the juggle of, you know, where are they going to be, you know, doing meetings, like you say. And I think it's very much taking it on a day-by-day basis as well. Some days I'll have them around with me. Some other days I can call on parent support. But I think we all need to be empathetic over the next 6 weeks for people who do have childcare, don't have that childcare as well, but have children finishing school, because I do think it's going to be an almighty big juggle again for the next 6 weeks.
Do you think, you know, COVID was obviously a massive sort of change in how we operated? You know, anyone who was working from home. Do you feel like businesses now want their employees back in the office, and is that the right approach?
Yeah, I've sort of been seeing trends where companies are sort of prescribing in terms of people coming back into the offices more, which, you know, I can understand in certain points. I think I know myself, I love in-person collaboration. There's certain things that I think you can't replicate online. And what we do is we have team meetings, sort of like focus days where we focus on bigger topics, where we're all in the room and, you know, get the brainstorming going or doing a bit of personal development. And those things I think are really valuable in person. But I think having to prescribe it to like X number of days, or I've heard of organisations actually going back 5 days a week into the office, is a bit sad, really, because, you know, we've shown that we can do it for over 3 years period of time. And I don't think that we need to make that big shift back where we're actually in the office full time. I think it needs to be that hybrid approach, and where prescribed days are in person, yes, that I understand that, but also giving people that flexibility to make those decisions that ourselves as well.
It's about trust, isn't it? And when you kind of treat people like grown-ups, they're going to, assuming that they're right for the role and right for the company, they're going to execute what they need to execute to the best of their ability, and actually saying, okay, you can do this at a slightly different time in a slightly different location. You're trusting them, and also they're more likely to stay with the company if you do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the companies that I've read about recently, so they had a big drive and emphasis of gender diversity within their business, tech business. And then obviously, started to see that increasing because of obviously, pandemic, women being able to have that flexibility more in terms of the childcare arrangements, which I personally mentioned. But then prescribing people to come back to the office has meant what they're going to do. They can't obviously manage it. So it's meant that the people that organization has lost has been mainly, parents and women because of those reasons. So I don't understand it. And I think you're right there in terms of trust. I was talking about it yesterday to a group of women tech leaders on one of the programs I run, the Confidence Collective. And it's around that trust. I think a lot of managers can manage, but when they get to that leadership element of it, really struggle in terms of that freedom and giving people that autonomy, and then obviously that meaning that essence of trust. And I always say, well, if you don't trust somebody, why have you employed them? So I think you need to look in terms of the reason why you're trying to prescribe people come back into the office. Is it because of genuine reasons for collaboration and certain meetings? But I know by talking to some of people I know in my network, they go into the office and then spend 90% of the time in a meeting room because they're on call. So it's counterproductive, really. So I think it's understanding what the requirement is and the big reason why you're wanting to get people back into the office, but not forgetting the people that do want that human connection. And I think it goes back to what I said right at the beginning about what flexible working is. It means different things to different people. And in that essence, then, well, some people want to go into the office and have that human connection and let them do that, but also, be open to the people that need the flexibility at home as well. And I think it's the art of communication, just asking your workforce what are their requirements, what do they need in terms of from a workplace setup now.
That's the definition of flexibility, isn't it? Actually listening to people and responding. Yeah.
And I remember when I was doing those, like I said, the policies, we never really spoke to anyone. It was just defined by, what ACAS said or, the new legislation. I said, but I look back at it now and I think, well, why didn't we just talk to people? What we do at Tech Returners is very much that. And I know we're going to come on to that in a little bit, but it is the whole art of communication and speaking to people because they'll give you insight around their requirements as well.
Do you think there's also a danger with looking to recruit the next generation of talent? Expectations have changed. A lot of these people coming into the workforce now have only known this kind of working. And also, do you think the expectations have changed with people who, due to COVID, have now said, actually, do you know what? I've realized that I shouldn't have to be in the office 5 days a week?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right in terms of the younger generation coming. If you started your work through the pandemic and you obviously used to in terms of being remote working, you're now looking at, well, I had that flexibility to do so then. Why can't I have it now? But again, I think it comes down to that individual because they might missed out some of the social elements, the collaborative elements from, joining an organization. So I think it's understanding from them what they want. And I do think it's sort of cliche, but the blended approach is the approach to go forward, where people have that sort of time, have that flexibility, and then they have that in-person time as well. And I think for the older generation, we've seen it from a returner's perspective, it has created a lot more opportunities. You know, a lot of our returners have been able to say they can transition back into the workforce because of the flexibility that organisations can now offer, and they don't need to be in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5. I don't know about you, but I don't know how I did it. I look back.
I listen to a lot of podcasts.
And I just think, how did I actually go to Manchester every single day, 9 till 5, I just don't know, because I think when I go into Manchester now, I quite then enjoy knowing that maybe the day after I've got some home time where I can focus, concentrate, and maybe catch up on a few bits if I've been in meetings all day. So it's sort of been really beneficial. But I do look back and think, God, I used to do that sort of commute and also those rigid hours, for a large proportion of my working life.
Yeah, and I used to get up at 5:30 in the morning. I still get up at 6 now. Well, I'm getting up at 6 to be productive from 6, not to travel, to miss all the traffic. And actually yesterday I went into Manchester, but it was for a specific reason, to look at an event space, for an event that we're hosting in September. So when you've got a specific reason, so it could be, like you say, the collaboration piece where you've got a team meeting, you're brainstorming, you're going to see a client, you're taking part in an event maybe, then it's great to do that. But then just go on public transport at a time which makes a bit more sense, in terms of missing traffic, get the laptop out and you're working the whole time. You're actually not away from the laptop, which then brings us on to that problem being always
Never
on.
off,
So is there a bit of a problem there, do you think, where people are always on now? If you are sort of working in the evenings from time to time, is that there a danger that people don't feel like they can switch off their phones?
I think so. And I think that's sort of what you need to understand about flexible working. So if you sort of say within your organization, you offer that flexibility to all, that means, to say if I look at my own situation, because I'm obviously taking my children, picking them up. So that means I'm on in the evening to catch up because I've made that choice. Somebody else in my team might not have made that choice. They might have finished their working day at 4 o'clock. I can't then expect them to reply. And I think then you have to have that sort of understanding about asynchronous communication. You have to have that accountability piece. I think that's really important, because it's okay, right, saying, well, I've been flexible working, but I think you do need some guidelines, education piece around that, because I think that's really important, because the risk is, oh, well, I know that Beckie might be picking this up later on, so I'm going to keep checking my phone, or I'm going to keep on my laptop, because I need a reply to that. That's not right, because you will have that always on mentality, which isn't great in terms of from mental health, and just a well-being perspective as well.
Before we come on to tech returners, you were once in a senior HR role, and you decided to leave that role as a result of this issue, didn't you? What happened?
So previous tech returners, HR director, and, very much champion diversity in technology right back in the early days, actually, and talking a lot about flexible working, something, that before having children, I was very much passionate about right in the early days. And these are the days when organizations used to put them on their careers websites as benefits. It wasn't really the norm. It was actually such a thing. You put it on your website and you attracted more candidates to come and work for your organization. And then I had Ethan and my first child, and I wanted to reduce my time down to 4 days rather than 5 days, having a Friday off. And I had a small team then, knowing that are still reachable on that Friday if anything happened. And I sort of had the conversation was brought to me that the business as such didn't feel that it was working. But when I probed and questioned into it, my performance hadn't, dipped. There was no sort of concern there. It was more around that presenteeism. I wasn't present and wasn't being seen in the office 1 day a week. And I was given some somewhat of an ultimatum to sort of choose about how I was actually going to, rectify that, which unfortunately led to, my resignation. There is no way in the world that I would choose work over family. Ethan was very young at the time. I wanted that dedication space. And all those factors that I sort of experienced really sort of built into why tech returners exist, and the importance of working with companies that are very much aligned to our values and mission around that accessibility piece, because it's so, so important. Because I would never want anybody to be put in that position or compromised around that situation like I was, because it's almost like I wanted to progress my career, but I also wanted to have an element of family life as well. So yeah, I think it was a very challenging time, but I reframed it to help in terms of what tech returners is all about today.
Well, work-life balance has been a buzzword for a while, but I think you're seeing more of it now. You and James Heggs set up tech returners after you left that role, I believe. Tell us a little bit about how it came about.
So interestingly, today, recording this podcast, 20th of July, is actually my son Ethan's 10th birthday. And even though he doesn't realise it as such, I do tell him, but he is the whole reason why tech returners exist. Like I sort of shared with that story about having him and being asked to sort of come back into full time because of presenteeism. He became my why and my reason of setting up the business. And I felt that if I was being in that situation, there could be other people wanting to return that might not have the opportunity or the accessibility to do so. I had no idea at the time whether that was even true. And James very willingly, backed me in terms of this idea that I had. And we formed a program where we wanted to support people coming back from a technical career break for whatever reason, and giving them the opportunity to upscale and then transition back into the industry. I think it's one of those where, like I said, I didn't know what was going to happen. Likewise, we didn't know whether it was going to be a success. And I look back at it now, and very much prominent today in terms of being Ethan's birthday, saying, wow, like just having such an impact, not just on my life, but on hundreds and hundreds of other people's lives as well, because of that experience. And that's where I talk a lot about reframing and reframing experience. And, that at the moment in time was quite a negative, dark place for me to be in terms of being sort of being given the ultimatum about my career and family life. But look what it's actually led to. It's enabled so many people to return to technology and give them the opportunity to do so.
Happy birthday to Ethan. You say he's 10 years old, did you say?
He's 10 today, yeah, 10. Double figures.
Milestone birthday. There you go. You'll be at a school leavers assembly then next year.
I will, yes. I might be rapping, you never know.
Playing a rapper. So you talked about reframing. Reframe is, Women in Tech is a conference that you also run. So you're a very, very busy person. But how do you live flexible working for your staff then today? And, how have you got any practical examples of how that's benefited your business?
Yeah, so like when James and I started Tech Returners, obviously there was only two of us right at the start, and James has a son as well. And one of the main important factors if we were going to grow a business was the flexibility, because we both needed it. We both needed that. We both wanted to, like you said, attend the school productions, do these school assemblies, do the pickups, do the drop-off. So it was really important to us. So when then our team started to grow, it was really interesting. They still say it now that they couldn't believe, you do hear a lot of companies say about flexibility, then you go in and actually it's not flexible. They might let you finish half an hour early or, have an extra half an hour at lunch, but it's not true flexible working. So when we were sort of defining it to the people that we started, I think people were a bit taken aback. I've even asked some of our members of the team just about their thoughts. And a lot of them said it took them a while to get used to of actually having that amount of flexibility, in terms of we give true flexibility of people know what they need to do in terms of their outcome, and we let people manage their own times around that. So I think one of the things that we did, we got everybody together on one of our sort of in-person days, because we felt collaboration was key around discussing this. And we came up with a flexible working manifesto where we actually asked everybody, what does actually flexible working mean to them? So that's why I was talking about it meaning different things to different people, because you can't just presume it should be given to parents. You know, I've got people on the team that being able to move back to different locations because that's where family are. I've got people that have been able to go to the gym in times that suit them because they might have a challenge in going to busy places because of mental health and anxiety. So we've given people that freedom. And then what we did once we defined it for our team is understand how we could implement it. So this is what I was talking about before. So we've done things about understanding and educating the team on asynchronous communication, holding people accountable. So there's many times, you know, I've been pulled up going, right, well, no, you're actually on leave, but we can see your green dot still on like Teams or Slack, etc. And, you know, I've had a text going, get offline, Becky, you've got to lead by example as well, which I appreciate as well. We have very much that culture at Tech Returners where we can challenge each other. And I do agree with that. And then we set something up, which we do, I have a smirk around like a bat phone. So anyone who remembers the old Batman where it was a red phone and it lit up and rang if there was an emergency. Well, we've sort of done the similar thing that everybody knows that if there's an absolute emergency and we need to contact that person, we'll pick up the traditional telephone and speak to them. So people don't have that fear if they've left something because they're going on holiday and still needing an answer or waiting for another person. They're not having to check all the time, you know, not having to be online. They can actually come offline. We also did things around statuses. We also did things around deleting it off our phones, etc. So we went through the whole sort of process and then we wrote it up. We wrote it up and then shared it amongst the team. And that's sort of like what we live and breathe by in terms of our flexibility. And I think people are really appreciative. Well, they've told me that they're appreciative. It's meant so much to them in terms of how they can balance their life between, you know, professional and personal, and an impact in terms of that balance has had on them as individuals.
I think culture is about so much more than just writing mottos or rules on a wall. I mean, you're going to tell me now that in your office you've got everything written on a wall. But yeah,
no, I don't agree with that at all. I do a session in the Confidence Collective about knowing and understanding your true authentic self, so your values. And when I say values, I always go, it's not about those stickers or those posters that you see on the walls. Sometimes you see them in the toilets. It's actually what's intrinsic to you. So forget all the, you know, the words, the buzzwords, actually your language in what actually a value is. So I think that's the core of it, is what it actually means to you, because it can mean different things to different people.
You were acquired by North Coders earlier this year. Can you just tell us a little bit about that process and about the plans to work together with those guys for the future?
Yeah, I think last year, James and I sort of realised the impact that we were having on so many people's lives, and the impact that we're having with organisations of really getting them to understand the value of a returner. And we're at that sort of crossroads where we wanted to do so much more, but knowing that, you know, the whole essence of Tech Returners was born out of my idea and actually was bootstrapped by James and I. So we've never had any funding, any loans, and we've sort of built it up from there. So we started to explore all different alternatives around funding. So, you know, whether that was private equity, you know, investors, et cetera. And we had a number of conversations, but nothing really felt right in terms of, you know, our values, in terms of what we wanted Tech Returners to become. And at the time, we started conversations with North Coders, and we've always had a true mutual respect for what each of those actually does. So we've never gone into sort of the entry level junior market. They've never explored into the mid-senior level market. We've respected what each other does in essence of our programs. And they wanted to run a DevOps cloud engineering upskill program. So approached James because that's his background. And so the collaboration started in terms of the conversations. Then it sort of became that actually we could utilize some of their Department of Education funding to help more returners get back into organizations. And some of their partners were looking for mid to senior level people. So that sort of the alignments and the synergies just started appearing. And then obviously that led to the conversations around the acquisition. And it was very difficult at the time, so James and I were functioning the business on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, because North Code is a PLC, obviously we had to keep everything to ourselves. So we're sort of functioning, running a business on one sort of track and then going through an acquisition, doing all the due diligence on another. That successfully completed in February. And it enables now companies to access a diverse talent pool. And diverse, I mean, people that are entering technology, career switches, and developing them through the organization, but also having the support and the experience of taking mid to senior level returners on board. Now that can be where we do blended teams, that where you could actually have them on a consultancy model. That could be just running a program that is blended or even separate. So it giving organizations and also individuals much more opportunity because it's a whole holistic approach and one we believe that nobody else is actually offering out there.
What was the process like? Because I guess a lot of people I speak to say, you've got to build a business with an exit in mind. Was that process kind of a natural evolution of what you were already doing, or was it a complete eye-opening experience for you?
So my background, like I said, is HR. So I've actually gone through in terms of experience of acquisitions and mergers, but it's nothing like when you do it for your own business. I've got to be totally honest in that. I think when you've actually built something up, and I call it my baby in essence, because it is relatable to Ethan as my child, it is somewhat different because there's a lot of emotion within that as well. So I think even though I'd had the experience of doing mergers and acquisitions before, I still learned and I'm still learning a lot around doing it for myself. Obviously, James and I had a long period of time to obviously, ask the questions, think about obviously, the pros and the cons, etc. But obviously when it successfully happened, the day of telling the team, you've got to understand they've got to go through that process as well. And then, we had the process of obviously bringing the two teams together, the communication, obviously people's fear factor, even though there is no and has been and will be no redundancies amongst the two teams. Obviously, that's still fearful for a lot of people because it's change. And I think, I learned a lot around that and, still trying to function and run a business. We had Reframe in a few weeks shortly after the acquisition. So I still had to sort of focus on that whilst, really focusing on making sure my team were happy and trying to answer questions that I might not know the answer there and then. And I think that's also something I learned about that lack of control, the uncertainty of going, well, I don't know necessarily how that's going to look yet because we might not have got to that point yet. So yeah, it's definitely been a huge learning experience throughout the past few months, and I'm sure it will be continuing going forward. And I think it's important to talk about that as well, because I think, when you talk about companies being acquired or selling or, buyout, etc., people talk about the positives, but I think it's also talking about the realities of the situation as well.
And it was crucial for you to actually ensure that flexible working ethos continued.
Yes, definitely. And I think that was one of the biggest concerns from my team, that they, I think one of the first questions, well, what does that mean to our sort of flexible working? And, when we look at it now, actually it's increased because when we've joined the group, North Coders had actually actually introduced a 4.5 day a week, which is looking to go to a 4 day a week next year. We're actually looking about how we can make those efficiencies and looking about how that's actually going to work to hopefully implement that in the year. So it's enhanced, but I can understand the reluctance and, the apprehension, first of all, when, because it is change, it's huge change to people. But they are now seeing the added benefits of being part of a larger group has actually had on them from an individual perspective as well.
I've had a couple of reader questions coming in. So we've spoken to our audience on our website and our newsletter, and we've said, have you got a question for Beckie? So both of these are anonymous, but the first one is, how do you stay focused and achieve your goals while you're working in a flexible workplace?
So let's be realistic that I'm going to say in terms of the tools that I use, but let's be realistic that I don't always keep to them. So I'm like many people have those moments of like, oh God, I'm all over the place, like I need to do this, I need to do that, I've not finished that, something pops up and I go, I've actually forgot that. So let's be realistic. I definitely don't have the answers, but I do have tools in place. So one thing that I was actually talking about yesterday, a tool that I use is called the ladder effect. So if I'm working on a particular piece of work, I sort of draw a ladder as such and talk about where I am now and where I want to get to for that particular project. And each rung of the ladder is sort of like the milestones that I need to do. But I don't just stop there. So I start on the left-hand side, all the things that could get in the way. And that can be from, life itself, but also negative self-talk, from a confidence perspective. So then I look on the opposite side and put in things around, well, if that happens, or if I feel that, how can I reframe it? How can I reposition it? And it's a really useful tool to do if you've got a huge piece of work. Sometimes I think, right, I've got to do this, or this like writing, or this sort of proposal, or this piece of like for reframe, and just looking at it as a massive goal is just like, wow, okay, that's just too much. So actually breaking it down, I'm sure there's lots of tools out there that do it, but I'm very much pen and paper still. I like to sketch things out, and I prefer to do that than to-do lists. So I'm quite a visual person with that. Also, I think, be kind to yourself. There is certain things that, you're going to lack focus on and procrastinate on and maybe not get done, in the best quality or the best time, but do be kind to yourself. I think something I've learned is stop being fixated on the end goal and embrace the journey a lot more. So I used to say things like, well, I'll be happy when, I'll be successful when. And actually by doing that, I was actually missing out on all that experience and being present right in the moment. And that's something that I'm personally working on, actually trying to be present here and now, rather than going, right, okay, when I do this or when I do that, or when I retrieve that, I'll be happier, because you've got to really the only thing that you can control is the actual here and now. You can't change the past, you can't predict the future. So, and again, don't be convinced that I'm saying I've got all the answers and how easy it is, because trust me, presenteeism I struggle with a lot. It's almost like having to pull myself constantly back into the here and now. But those are a couple of sort of tips that I would suggest.
You have to stay flexible, don't you? Actually, we ran a piece with Alexandra Sefra from Spoke, which is like a company in London that uses music to help young men struggling with mental health. Yeah. And she talked about the power of 1% changes. Yes. So you're not
marginal gains. Yeah.
Exactly. You can't change everything straight away. So, but what you won't see is a change from week to week. But after 6 months, a year, you'll think, whoa, how far have we come? And then you can celebrate that, right?
Yeah, and also a book that I do recommend, and I was only talking about it yesterday, so Atomic Habits. So I don't know whether you've read it, but if you read the book, it's very much a common sense approach. When you read it, I go, well, I know that, but in a way that I know that, but I don't necessarily do it, but I can do it because it really fits in terms of my common sense, logical approach. So it talks about, like, if you want to go to the gym in the morning, make sure you lay out your clothes that you want to wear. I hope a member of my team doesn't mind me sharing this, but she used to procrastinate in terms of like what she was going to wear that week. So what she did, and she does each week, is actually take out of the wardrobe the 5 outfits that she's going to wear. So she doesn't have to think about that each morning. She just grabs them off the rail, she can wear them. And I think it's putting those tools and techniques into place. And that's a great book to read. Definitely one that I really enjoyed and got a lot of practical sort of advice from. And again, don't get me wrong, there's certain times that when you don't do it, and you've just got to go, well, I didn't do it there, but what have I learned from that? And move on from it, and don't sort of continually beat yourself up, because that's what we do. So one other thing that I've tried to do at the end of each night is about gratitude. So I'm a big advocate, as James is, around the 6-minute diary. So again, it gives you a template about being grateful and understanding what you want to achieve for that day, and then being grateful at the end of it, and what's gone well within that day. And it gives you a great structure. And I think there's an awful lot of research around how gratitude can help in terms of your perspective around focus, and your well-being.
Atomic Habits is I hope there's no world leaders that are reading that and taking advice from it. It's not. It's probably like the atomic clock, I guess. Doing things like on clockwork. We've got another question actually from a reader. How do you set targets for your staff during flexible working? Do you require a set number of hours that they fulfill, or?
No, I was being totally honest. I think I can talk from a tech returner's perspective about what we've set up. So obviously in a contract, there is a set number of hours. You've got to have a contract with a set number of hours. But I would definitely say all of my team would be that we are definitely not clock watching. I definitely don't monitor that. It's gone from, so the saying used to be focus on output rather than hours, but I focus very much more on outcome. So my team know in terms of what we need to achieve. So I'm very clear in terms of, when I've sort of led the strategy or things around that, about what we need to achieve, sort of how we're going to do that, sort of the key milestones within that. And then I think because they know that we trust them, then they go out, I think, beyond what they need to do in terms of the expectations to do it. And I think because we give them that freedom, that accountability, we get so much motivation and engagement around that. So no, there's no targets around there. It's very much my team know in terms of what the outcomes have been and what they need to sort of work towards, and how they then do that is in their own sort of little workspace, flexible space, however they manage their time in general.
So this is the part of the pod where we asked you for your rocket fuel, a few quick fire tips for companies looking to adopt or increase their flexible working practices. What can you tell them? What's your rocket fuel?
So I think just recapping on a few things that I've said. So I definitely recommend doing a flexible working manifesto. So actually speak to people around what does flexible working mean to them, and how you're going to implement. Accountability. So making sure if you are doing something, holding each other to account, that you're actually sort of going in accordance with that, because I talk a lot about it. It's actions, not words. And going back to the words on a wall, etc., that doesn't really carry any weight. It's what people do and how they act and behave within that. And then sort of that trust the people you've got within your business. And I can't emphasize that enough. You have brought those people in for a particular reason. You have seen the value, the add that they can provide to that organization. So trust them to do that. So, that's probably the biggest advice, and the things that I know have been successful in growing the team to where we've got to, from a tech returner's perspective. And what you get in back is an abundance. Sometimes I have to tell my team, right, you actually are more passionate and more driven than actually I am, from leading the business. But yeah, because they trust, the trust is there, the accountability, they want and the purpose, and they really connect with them.
We know that Beckie Taylor is a HR high flyer. She's an entrepreneur. She's exited a business, but is still running it. She's a super mum. But tell me something about you that would surprise me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I suppose a part of my life that I'm very vulnerable. So anybody who's heard me talk, I talk a lot about things that I have gone through. So my 2 children, going through 9 years of IVF, I lost my dad through the pandemic and the things that's taught me. But I suppose I've never really gone back to the beginning. So when I was 7, I lost my hearing in my left ear. So I went on holiday with my family. I've got 2 older brothers and with my mum and dad. And it was long before the holiday reps, etc. So it was basically you went, and my mum and dad didn't really travel abroad very much. And I became ill, and I went to a doctor's that turned out actually not to be a doctor's. And I was prescribed a medication that was too strong for me in terms of being a 7-year-old child. And it wasn't until then the Christmas, and it was back for your older listeners when Walkmans, and I had a Walkman for Christmas, and I got my headphones, and I turned around to my mum and went, well, why do I need 2? Because I can't hear out of one ear. And I think obviously that really shocked and scared mum and dad, went for numerous hearing tests and realised I didn't have, literally cut off all my nerve endings in my left ear. So I couldn't have it. Oh God, I got the word. Hearing aid, that's what, hearing aid or anything in terms of to help my hearing, because I just didn't have any nerve endings. And I think, I look at that, and again, it's things that I look for lessons and look for things that I've reframed, and, I've overcome that sort of challenge. And now I want to talk a little bit more about that. I've been asked to talk to the Deaf Institute around, people that might have had the similar experiences or experiences like that, about, being a businesswoman, and I've not let sort of that affect me within there. There's obviously things that I need to be aware of. I find it very difficult in crowded sort of spaces, noisy spaces, but I've just learned to adapt, and I've learned to share. I remember when, going in the clubbing ages, and God knows what I agreed to in some clubs when people were talking to me and they were talking to my left ear, and I'm just going, yeah. Just because it was the embarrassment of not wanting to say, but now I'm quite comfortable with that. But it's something that probably not many people realize about me. But I hope it also gives, reassurance, comfort to someone in maybe going through similar challenges, that, it doesn't necessarily have to hold you back.
Beckie, it's been an absolute pleasure, just listening to you, your thoughts and tips on building a flexible workforce. It's been so valuable. To summarize the key findings, you've got to trust your staff. You've got to kind of build those relationships with them, so you can trust that they're going to, to perform their duties to the best of their ability, but also, take care of themselves and their personal life as well. And actually adopting that as a way of running your business overall, rather than just writing it on the wall. I think you're more likely to attract staff and retain staff, but actually you're going to build a better business, aren't you? So thank you for that. If anyone's got any feedback on today's episode or would like to share, their thoughts on flexible working, you can contact us on LinkedIn or Twitter, or you can comment on the video episode of this podcast on YouTube. You can also drop us an email at podcasts@businesscloud.co.uk. If you enjoyed the episode and found it useful, please like and subscribe on your preferred platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and more, to be among the first to hear insights from renowned entrepreneurs and investors. Thanks for listening, and see you soon. LaunchPad is a Tech Blast podcast produced in partnership with pan-European B2B tech PR and communications agency Taito. New episodes are streamed on Tech Blast's YouTube, LinkedIn and Twitter pages from 12 p.m. on the final Friday of every month. Or you can find all episodes on YouTube and all major audio podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you never miss an episode.